So, good afternoon and good morning to those on the West Coast. Welcome to our webinar today, Evolving the Talent Acquisition Process, Mastering the Recruiting Continuum. If this is your first time joining us or you're not familiar with people science, we provide talent acquisition advisory services, recruitment process partnering, recruitment placement services, and we also have our own proprietary software we've taken to the market called HireGate, which is an HR technology that augments your ATS and provides recruitment data and gives you AI-driven insights. You can always go check us out at people-science.com or HireGate.com as well to learn more about us, or reach out to us if you have any questions. We're always happy to schedule a complimentary strategy session with you. So my name is Jessica Oberto. I am the Director of Process and Implementation at People Science. I'll be your moderator for the next hour and walking you through the continuum along with Christine and Lindsay. I know a lot of you know Christine, but again, she is our founder and CEO of People Science and HireGate. After she left her corporate position in the staffing industry, she founded HireGate herself, and her main goal was to really help companies solve their toughest hiring challenges and change the way they acquire talent that they need in the current and in the future. So for the last 2 decades, Christine's been on the cutting edge of information systems, recruitment processes, and methodologies at People Science. And part of that great work that she's done has been creating the Recruiting Continuum, which is our methodology and our secret sauce to success here at People Science. So along with Christine, we have Lindsay Roundtree. She's our Director of Recruiting and Client Services here and a big part of our success. Lindsay's an expert in client account management and relationships, developing and leading recruiting teams, and designing effective and creative strategies around candidate sourcing and recruitment workflow. She's also been a big piece of the HireGate development here at People Science as well. So as we go through the webinar today, this is meant to be more conversational. So we do encourage everyone to use the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We also have chat enabled today. So we'd like to hear any of your questions, any of your feedback that you have, and we'll make sure we answer all the questions before the end of the webinar. With that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Christine.
Good morning. This is so awesome for the three of us to be on a webinar again, because I think we started doing these monthly webinars, just about monthly webinars right before the pandemic hit, right? And then after the pandemic, it seemed like it was the three of us all the time. So it's good to be back into a webinar together. I'm excited about that. And I think this is an excellent time for the audience to talk to us too. I know if you're a follower of ours, which I appreciate all the following that we get. It's been actually pretty awesome to watch our followers grow and get to know them. We don't usually have the chat turned on. And one of the reasons that we don't do that is we typically have guest speakers that come on with us. And in this case today, we're really going to talk about people science methodology. And Jess was nice enough to put up the recruiting continuum that we're going to talk about today. So questions could come up and we can go from there. But let's get started first with some of the demographics or some of the metrics that are going on today. Jess, can you take me to unemployment? Okay. Our unemployment numbers, not startling, right? Although when you look at this screen, and I've intentionally moved this over to bar charts. So last month in June, we had an unemployment rate of 4.1%, higher than we've seen certainly in quite some time. However, I want to make it really clear that full employment, according to the Federal Reserve, is between 4 and 6%. We are still well below full employment. And I think people that, this low unemployment rate is a really, really good thing for the candidates. I've got to argue sometimes the yes and no on that. This tells us about the climate, right? And it's kind of stuck, right? When our unemployment rate really stays low for any length of time, that means the markets are changing. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. What we're seeing, what we're hearing. Of course, a lot of things are impacting that, including AI, which we'll talk about today. Okay, Jess. So the next metric that we like to share with you is the employment added or lost. In the month of June, 206,000 more employees were in the workforce than the month before. So this is a really good indicator of telling us what's going on. But again, even though this looks a little startling up and down, if you really look at the numbers, they're not that far off. So we're not seeing huge increases. This is the number, by the way, that gets so many different press stories. And this is a number that is watched closely when it comes to determining interest rates. That, of course, along with the unemployment rates. All right, just move us along. And then the JOLTS report, which came out yesterday, woo, that was a win that we got that in just in time for today. Not a lot of change in job openings. So this is measuring job openings, still 8,184,000 job openings, still a lot of job openings up there. And, I see a lot of things on social media, like recruiters keep job openings. These aren't really true openings. Even if you took 10% off of this, that is a huge number. It's still a huge number. So, and it's not a number that can be easily identified. I've been looking at the sources that they're using, and it looks pretty accurate based on what I'm saying. But any of this information that you're interested about, if you really want to have a conversation, this is what I do most of my days, is take a look at what's going on in the employment economy, always open to having a conversation about it. And of course, I will tell you that I try to get our data specifically from the BLS, and then I will look at other advisors, but I try not to follow media trends, because you'll see one media will announce it one way, another one, this is a really good number. Oh, we're stagnant. I say make up your own mind. The other thing that I will tell you is when you look at these numbers, if you do go to the BLS, you can disseminate it down into, so what's really happening with recruiters? What kind of hiring is going on with recruiters? What's happening in the world of tech? It can't get micro, but it can get, I'm going to say what I call macro, micro, right? So if you want to see services altogether, you can find it that way. So a lot of good information there. I encourage you to take it from your own perspective. And of course, all three of us are open for that. Specifically, Lindsay. So Lindsay spends a lot of time looking at market demographics for our organization. It's leading all of recruiting. So she tends to be even more well-versed than I am, especially when it comes to specific positions, right, Lynn?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So on that note, a couple of points that we really want to bring up. We try to make sure that we tell you what we're seeing and hearing that's hot. And if you want to let me know in the chat too, I would be very curious to see who else has heard about this. But talking about what's going on in the industry and looking at the announcement that came out from Lattice. So Lattice is an HR company headquartered on the West Coast, and their CEO made an announcement that many of the HR assistant roles will be treated like employees. Many of the AI, so they created an AI assistance for HR. So they've now got this AI system to assist HR. What she did differently as the CEO is she made the announcement, these are our HR assistants, and we're going to treat them like employees. And the terms that she used, alluded to, and even specifically said, they'll be onboarded. They're going to be going through the same process as a new hire. And social media went crazy. The crowds went crazy. I wonder what the sentiment of our group is about that. They did quickly retract. Right. So not that they're going to stop using HR assistants, but to say that you as an HR assistant, as a human being, are the equivalent and being treated exactly like HI is really different. On this note, I want to tell you, I saw her speak at what was that? Which conference was that, Jess, that we were at that she spoke? HR Transform. Right. She was on the main stage. And I think that the fact that she was able to, pull this into a different direction so quickly was really good. If you're interested in more information about this, we'll put some of the links in our follow-up deck that's sent out to you. But if you haven't heard about it, take a look. And here's one of the reasons that I think this is important. We're also going to be talking a bit about what happened with Intuit, right? So Intuit has come out and made a proclamation they're going to be laying off 1,800 employees. Sorry, not sorry. If you read first off, if you read social media, boy, they are really tramping on this. But if you take the time to read the actual article, and anybody in human resources, anybody in talent acquisition should read the Intuit article from the CEO, because he talks about how they have been spending time looking at AI and how that is changing the complexion of their organization. Arguably, they're saying we are in the forefront. We know what's going to happen, and we know what type of employees and the type of talent we need. And based on that, we're going to make these changes. We're not laying off because we have a cash shortage. We're not laying off because we're not in a good position. We're laying off because we know what the future looks like for Intuit. At this point in time, I kind of feel like anybody who has an organization says, I know what my company looks like with AI is jumping the gun a bit. However, we've got to start somewhere. And I do think you're going to see more CEOs follow suit on this because we are all diligently in the C-suites looking at what is the effect and trying to plan our organizations around that. I think the biggest downfall for Intuit is that the statement that their CEO also made was that a bulk of the employees, 1,050 of these employees, have been put on warning because of performance. I'm paraphrasing, by the way, that they have been put on warning for performance and they weren't up to par. Therefore, they needed to exit. He didn't trash them. He didn't say these employees are not performing. What he said is we put them on a program. They're not stepping up. It's time for them to go to their next assignment. And the reason that I really wanted to bring that point to fruition is we talk on these webinars a lot about the employer-employee balance and how that has shifted. And I think there's a lot of thoughts out there with the consultants and with the C-suite that as the unemployment rate raises, a lot of this balance is going to come back into place, and that leadership and companies are going to have come back into a full power. To me, it's like diversity. You can't go back. Like you've already gotten there, you really can't go back. But I do think that we need to hear more from CEOs posing who they really are so that candidates and employees can make real decisions based on not only the point of view they feel the company should take, but what the company feels their point of view should be. Did I get that right? Do you see what I mean, Lynn and Jess?
Absolutely. Yes. I think too with that, it does bear some transparency for Intuit, right? So if you're thinking of applying to a position there, they're very performance-based and that's what you're going to be measured on. And it's something that you really can't hide from. So with that, but on the other hand of it, I do feel that what were the warnings given? It's not clear enough for me, to be fair. So if someone is applying to another position and they see their last role was at Intuit, they were in a sales role or whatever capacity to measure performance, it does give them a bad first, look or first glance by a recruiter or hiring manager. So
I agree with you, Jess. My understanding was that they changed their KPI, so their goals, the structure, those types of things for a large batch of folks, and then came back and analyzed, okay, who is showing success and who isn't. Which in turn, from a recruiting perspective, if you were to come across one of those people, one of my first questions would be, why were you laid off, and what was the increase? I think we need to understand that piece of it a little bit more. Was it achievable? Was it not achievable? How does that, really play?
Achievable.
Right, exactly. But I do give them a lot of credit for implementing AI. I myself, we've implemented AI into HireGate over the last year, and the growth of the AI itself from implementing it a year ago to now, I was telling Jessica and Christine this yesterday, is astronomical, right? We were looking at a really defined set of skills that it was extracting, and now we're in, 500, 600, 700. So implementing sooner rather than later, when it fits into your business model, is not the worst choice, because, the AI is going to grow and become more intelligent the more that you use it. So it does make sense to get ahead of the game and implement where you can, but the effects of others can be prominent as you make those changes. That's just kind of the nature of the business now.
Right. And
I do think, go ahead, Jess.
I'd say my hope would be too, was that if these organizations that are focused on implementing AI into their companies and for their employees really partner closely with universities and business programs and training, so we can make sure that people that are in the process of getting their degree and have a career plan are in line with what employers are expecting. I think that's a big piece of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think it's going to be like this for organizations, right? Because to Lindsay's point, so just putting one tiny piece, about over a year ago now, igniting one tiny piece of AI into HireGate, what we found is the learning, so the ML side, the machine learning side of this, is showing us things we did not predict and couldn't predict. Because until you ignite it, you really don't know how fast it will learn, what it will learn, and what it will tell you that you can't speculate about. right? So you can either embrace this or run from it, but obviously running from it, I don't think that's going to work at this point. We're already in it, kind of up to our noses on it.
Yeah. And I see Kevin made a comment in the chat. Do we think that this would affect into its employer brand when applicants are looking to work with them? I definitely would think so. I mean, anything that's in social media or in the news or out there, people applying are going to make up their mind about a company, whether that's good or bad. And, maybe they would be more hesitant to apply for a specific role because there is always that fear that down the road it may be eliminated due to AI. So it could also affect their candidate pools that they're getting.
I agree, Jess. I think that there will be a change in the candidate pool, but on the flip side of that, as a candidate, you have a leg up now. You need to go into that interview educated on what their AI looks like, how that will pertain to your role, and come armed saying, this is the AI I've used previously. This is the success I saw. This was maybe some of the downfalls that I saw. So where, yes, I think it certainly can change your candidate pool and turn some folks away. If you are a candidate, you now know one of the main things that's at top of mind, and you can come to those conversations more prepared.
And I think that's the proclamation they're making. Because wouldn't you be intimidated, right? So if you don't feel comfortable with that, wouldn't you feel intimidated? And maybe, I wonder, well, that's a segue into the last review, the last article that we have for today before we get into the continuum. But Vijay Kamramurthy, who's the CTO at Scale AI, arguably one of the forefront runners on this, right? During an interview last couple of weeks ago, he said, "We are really in a war for AI talent right now, and we're fighting this war against China. Private companies are fighting also. The public sector needs really smart AI experts to be able to evaluate these technologies." Kind of goes unsaid, right? We're all in TA. We're going to get AI talent. What does AI talent look like? This is where it got really interesting to me. But in the middle of this AI war, we need to have an incredibly high concentration on the right qualified people in certain roles to push this technology forward. He then goes on to say that the people that come in have really interesting perspective, but it's not computer science. It's things like philosophy and psychology. So I think we all say, oh, let's forget AI and say in technology, we need developers, right? And you still need developers, of course, in AI. But AI, because it is a thinking, we'll call it, of course, it doesn't think, but it does think, right? Artificially thinking. We need to have personas. They need to understand people. They need to understand customer reactions. Really, the things that I think, having gone to college in the 80s, I can tell you those were things that were really interesting moving forward. But so when we look at colleges, and to Jess's point, when we look at how we're going to in-train, right? So in training our own staff, looking for intelligence and promoting intelligence. So as these more task-oriented positions become intellectual positions, how are we going to uplift our internal staff? How are you going to position yourself to the outside world? Right. And how can talent acquisition engage in that and make sure they're a part of it? Awesome. Any comments before we move into the continuum? So all these articles that I just cited, again, Jess we'll make sure these get to the deck that we circulate out to you so that you can take a look on your own. So let's talk about the recruiting continuum. So, and I've got to tell you that the way this came about is in the early 2000s, when I had first started the company, I had a client who said to me, wait a minute, why are you able to come in and tell us what we need to do? And why are you able to put a team together that can execute this and we can't? I thought that was a really good question. I'm like, I don't really know you internally, but I think it's because we have a methodology. And I started to document everything that happened through recruiting. And the end result of that is the recruiting continuum, which arguably has been used by quite a few of the consulting houses. Some people like to say that China stole it. I like to say that we had a Chinese client that was actually headquartered in France that used it and had tremendous results. But the whole idea behind the continuum is to take talent acquisition and recruiting out of just find me candidates. You wouldn't start a corporation that made widgets and say, just go make me some widgets. Yet in talent acquisition, where we can't make people, right? It's more like, why haven't you found me people? When are you going to find me people? How do you find people? Can you just go find me some people? When it really is a business process. So what we found is by laying recruiting flat and looking at each segment of recruiting, measuring our client's performance, and then saying, here's what you need to do to get to the next level to conquer that. So many discovery pieces come up. So by laying recruiting flat and then saying, these are the connectors, which Jess is going to go through all of this with us in just a second, we're able to go into any recruiting situation and say, this is what really needs to be done. You need, by the way, you need data to do this. Your ATS can provide some of it. That's why we created HireGate, because having augmented over 20 some, maybe even 30 some applicant tracking systems, we know that our applicant tracking systems cannot collect much of the data that Jess is going to show us today. But you have it. If you don't, we'd love to talk to you about HireGate, but if you don't have HireGate, you probably have it in recruiters' notebooks, spreadsheets, brains. But once you pull this data and you look at it objectively as compared to subjectively, right? Compared to saying there's no candidates out there in this field, as saying how many candidates are there and why can't I get there? Putting a real business focus and a business process in place. And that's what the continuum allows us to do. So without further ado, Jess, you want to take us there?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. So today, as we walk through the continuum, we're going to go through these specific buckets. These are the buckets laid out. Now, this would be a lot if we really dived into each piece, and we actually have separate webinars on some of these buckets. So as we're going through this, we'll do a high-level overview. We will send out a copy of the deck and the webinar, so don't feel like you have to write everything down as we're going through it. But definitely go to our website. If there's something that interests you, like when we talk about EVP, we have a specific webinar just on the EVP, so you can dig into more detail. Also take notes if there's something that sparks your interest as we discuss it. You can always, reach out to us and schedule a strategy session, and we can go over those pieces with you. So what I would like to suggest that you do. So the point of this webinar today is to look at each step of the recruiting process and get an idea in your head of where your current organization is today and where you'd like to be in the future. What we have on our website at peoplescience.com are assessments that are completely confidential, free for you to use, and this will help you evaluate where you are today in recruiting. We have a talent acquisition assessment, so that's assessing your whole process. We have recruiter talent assessment, so that's focused on skill sets that you need. And then one of the things that I did want to mention is we also have a cost of vacancy calculator on there for you to use. This is a great tool when you're trying to show ROI on talent acquisition, and also really partner with the business hiring managers to show just how important it is to fill a position and how much it's costing every day when that position remains open. So I would suggest that you go to the talent assessment link today. Lindsay will put that in the chat for us.
They're there already, Jess. All three links are there. Mm-hmm.
As I go through each of these buckets, just kind of think in your head, where would you grade yourself today? Doesn't have to be perfect, just an idea. You can see here, you can select the gradings as you go through. And then when we're done, you can click submit, and it'll show you a graph report of where you think you lie. And then this is a good starting point for whatever pieces you want to bite off and achieve, and getting back to 100% kind of gives you a roadmap of where you need to go. All right, so let's get back into the presentation. And we're going to get started with the first step in the recruiting continuum, define. I think of this as the discovery phase. This is when you get a new position to recruit or fill on, and you really need to take a lot of time to sit down and think, okay, first, why do we need to fill this position, and what is this position going to do? What's the value of the position to the business? What's the cost of vacancy? And what is this role defined as? A lot of this is working with the hiring manager, right? Because they're the one that came to you in the first place and said, we needed this position filled. So it's going to entail a lot of learning and listening on TA's part for that. So as we're looking to get these buckets done in the objective, these are some strategies that TA may want to include to get these things done. And as I'm going through each of these buckets, I forgot to mention, don't feel bad that you're not doing all of these today. Most organizations aren't. Remember, if you can hit all of these at 100%, you're going to have a highly functioning talent acquisition engine, which is what you want to get to and you can get to. But I would suggest biting off pieces as you can manage them. You can't do all of this at once if you haven't started. So give yourself some grace in that area. So again, doing thorough launch calls with hiring managers, really understanding the specifics of each position and scope. And this could be something like a face-to-face meeting with the hiring manager, actually sitting in the workspace where the candidate would be. We've had positions where they're door-to-door sales, and we may do a drive along. So really having the recruiter or TA understand what that position's like on a day-to-day basis will give you a better idea of how to explain the position to a candidate, how to advertise for it, and how to really assess a candidate to make sure that they'll be the right fit for the role. One of the big things in this stage, really getting it down and getting it down well, is the employee value proposition. Like I said, we've done whole hour webinars on this, and we have one up on our website you should check out. But being able to identify and establish what the employee value proposition is, and that's the part of it for the candidate thinks, what's in this job for me? Why would I want to work for this organization in this position? And being able to define that by the company as a whole, the division. So if it's IT, why would I want to work with this IT team? And then for the actual position, once you can get a good understanding of what the EVP is, and then being able to take that and roll it into your candidate messaging, roll it into your job advertisements. This way, you're really more likely to target the right candidate and gain their attention. Also, being able to create specific recruitment plans for each role is important. So once we really understand the intricacies of the position, know what the ideal candidate profile is, you'll be better prepared to create a more focused recruitment plan. Let's see.
As if I can interject something too before we leave the defined thing. So, this is causing me to think about what are some of the sore points that can be resolved through this kind of work, right? And I think it looks a little overwhelming when you first look at it, but if you think in terms of, so you've got this hiring manager who doesn't get back to you. If you start in the beginning, starting to address that, building the relationship, getting the trust going, everything runs smoother and your time to fill goes down. And your frustration level goes down. And I know that that's not always easy, right? Or sometimes you'll have the ones that just want to talk forever, and then you'll have the others that just avoid you like the plague or just have had a bad run. But this really helps with that. The other thing is if you're sitting there with a desk full of recs, and you're like, where do I start? And this one's complaining and that one's complaining. If the cost of vacancy is done, then you can actually advise, go back to leadership and say, hey, the sales department's cost of vacancy is $400,000 a year for this position. These positions, the cost of vacancy total about $100,000. I'm going to head in this direction. See, do you see what I'm doing? I'm also building a case for myself that maybe you need to put more recruiters on this. Maybe I need more support instead of it being, Chris has failed because she hasn't filled the sales positions and the service positions that we were looking at. So that's the type of ideology that we're talking about and where you can go from there. Anything else, Lynn, that you think's a big obstacle that's dealt with through this?
I do find that, those C-level, high level, maybe a heavy hitting sales role, like you were just referencing, Christine, they get this kind of fanfare in the front, right? A lot of this work is done up front. I do feel like when you get into those more repetitive, high volume roles, this somewhat fizzles out, right? It's done once and then it's just applied to every role, which is, where the roles themselves may be similar. They're more than likely sitting in the hands of different managers, or maybe there are small differences between locations, let's say. So where I think this is extremely important, I just want to kind of stress the fact that this is also relevant to those high volume positions where some of these pieces, the EVP, for example, will roll into all of those roles, but your stakeholders are going to look different and their wants and needs may be just a little different. And so where it's super important to do this for every role, that also is going to apply to those high volume roles that feel similar. At the very least, having that intake and understanding the wants and the needs of your location and your managers as well.
Right. And understanding you may have $400,000 cost of vacancy on one position for sales, but if your cost of vacancy is, you know, 100,000, I'm just making numbers up, $100,000 a year for a customer service rep, and you've got 20 of those open, where's the, you know, what I mean, where is this really supposed to be going? So I think really addressing the cost of vacancy can really help you not only know what to focus on, but to really build your value to the business. And it's just not done enough. Okay, Jessica, get out of your way
So
now.
we are going to move on to attract. So now that we have a solid idea of what the position is and what the candidate profile should be, we need to get applicants in, right? So this is where we're putting advertising out. We're doing job postings. We may be posting on social media, anything you can think of. And then as we are putting that messaging out there, really testing and probing it as well. So being able to track, and this is part of what we use HireGate for, is our outreach working with our candidates. As we're looking at the results and the data, we can go back and tweak it if it's not. So part of that would be having a recruiter in the seat that's, being able to communicate well with the candidates, tracking that feedback, and then going back and redoing strategy on those pieces, as well as looking at the engagement results. So what's working, what's not working. Like Lindsay mentioned, you're going to need a different plan for high volume recruitment as opposed to a big dollar salesperson. So being able to see what works for specific positions and what types of tools and sourcing vehicles are we using that are best. And then as we're doing that, again, like I said, always monitoring it through data and adjusting it as needed. So some of these actual, well, how do we do this, right? And I think a big part of that, and I know a lot with our clients, is really looking and evaluating job postings sometimes. We might have a client and they're like, our job postings are out there, but it's actually a job description. So applicants are way overwhelmed when they're looking at something. It's not catching their attention as quickly as we'd like, and it's not showing the EVP there clearly enough. So being able to look at what's working in job postings and revising them as needed. Being able to make sure, and this is where a lot of that work we did in Define is coming into play, that the messaging, the recruitment marketing plans are really attracting the right talent. So the messaging is hitting home for someone and they're more likely to respond. As well as putting messaging and job postings out there, this part is also super important to watch your employer branding. So that means looking at reviews on Glassdoor, even going into Facebook social groups. So, in our world, there's the TA recruiting. You can see where people could be unhappy with an employer because of the interview process or the way they were treated. So really having a plan in place to keep a close eye on that. And then what do you do once you have bad feedback or, bad reviews on Glassdoor? Having a plan in place to manage those is important. Lindsay and Christine, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I did want to just drive home that your job descriptions and your job postings do not have to be the same. We test this theory with clients quite often where we'll do what we consider a blind ad, where we take a job description, we make sure that the EVP is the most prominent thing. And yes, the requirements are there, but the extra language, the extra verbiage that's in your job description is removed from the job posting, and the posting is then simplified and more relevant directly to the candidates you're trying to attract. So just driving home that fact, your applicant tracking systems more than likely are integrated with your tools, the places that you're posting, and that's pushing your full job description most of the time. You can work with a lot of your applicant tracking systems to create a difference between a job description and your job posting. And sometimes that can make a huge difference.
Right. And there's also sometimes, it's been found that certain words can turn off candidates.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to attract a diverse candidate slate, you may need to look at how you're wording things. There's AI and tools that you can use to help you do that as well.
It used to be hard to do that. It's not anymore. And I think too, I'd like to say to attendees, while we're going through, this is, Jess had showed you the grading system that's on our website. You can actually use this to grade yourselves. and I applaud you for being here because you're working on it as well as in it. One of the biggest downfalls, every time we get a call from somebody saying it's broken or they don't know what to do or what's going on in their market or they're opening it, they have a new initiative, whatever the case is, it's, it's always about how do you look, how we can come in with fresh eyes. Okay. But we also are looking from 1,000 feet up. We're not doing the work yet. And there's a lot to be said for working on it as well as in it. So if you're one of those organizations, in a position where you're in it every day, it's hard to look at this. So do it at a separate time. Yay for joining the webinar. And maybe this is a good time for you to do it. The other thing I would caution you is don't go ahead and say execute advertising. Yeah, we do that really well. Do you? Question yourself a little bit, because the more you can raise the bar on each one of these. So let's say you come in and you're at 80%. It could be that if you move that another 10%, you'll see 40 more candidates for a specific kind of rec. You don't know until you apply it. But I can tell you that in all the years we've been doing this, and really this went live in 2007, I've never seen anybody implement this who didn't get more remarkably better, not like a little better, remarkably better at recruiting. This is your key. So when you're up at night, and you don't know what to do, pull out the continuum.
All right, so we're moving on to the next stage in the continuum, which is source. So here the objective is to identify and reach out to all possible talent. So we're going to be executing our sourcing plan. So you'll have your team of sourcers or recruiters that are going to those social media groups, job boards, associations, and finding candidates that fit the profile, and then reaching out to your complete talent pool. And you want to make sure here that it's a balanced talent pool. So this is including ATS, so that's your incoming applicants that are applying, any referrals that you may have from colleagues, people in the seat, internals, so internal movement within the organization, and then the sourced results. So what does that look like? So really looking to execute sourcing and recruitment for positions in scope. You want to make sure that, and you should have been doing this when you were in the define and attract stage, but you have a wide variety of tools and methodologies to use. You don't want to just use the same thing all the time for every position. That will never work for you, and you'll just get the same results. So making sure that it's tailored and strategic for each position, sometimes even by market, you have to switch things up. And then really making sure too that the sources that you're using, tools, job boards, that they're also encouraging a diverse candidate slate. Because if you're just going to the same pool, you're probably going to get the same cohort time and time again. So it's important to make sure that you're looking for specific diversity sites. I know, when Lindsay and I are planning recruitment plans for our clients, we put a special focus on diversity there as well. Mm-hmm. Now, as you're starting to source, you should be collecting the data, right? Whether you're using HireGate or your own internal tool. And after a few weeks in this, you'll be able to look at, what are our anticipated time to fill targets? This will be powerful for anyone in recruiting to have, because you'll be able to speak and communicate well with the business and your hiring managers, set expectations, but then really make sure that you're keeping the team on target. So what a healthy pipeline looks like to get to a determined fill date. And also part of this, I think, and I don't know if we specifically mention it in the rest of the slides, but making sure that as you're sourcing, you really pull in your hiring manager and the people that would be working with this candidate on the team. Sometimes they can be your best sources. They're in the seat, they're working in, say, IT. They might be able to tell you where to go to find these people that you might not be aware of. There might be a Reddit group they follow where people have conversations about jobs and looking for opportunities, or a specific network or a meeting that you can attend where these people gather. So make sure that you really pull on the hiring managers and internals as well to help you with some of that outreach.
I think looking at the effect of these tools too, right? Anytime you put a platform in place in any business process, it changes the way you do things. You wind up following their process. No matter how customizable it is, at the beginning, you're going to follow their process. And that process is the foundation. So even if you customize it, Workday, oh, did I say that slowly? Even if you customize it, you're still going to be operating under that operating system. So when you do your due diligence and you're saying, okay, we're sourcing, what is the ATS helping us do? And where does it maybe have a glitch that isn't helping us? For referrals, is the referral program accurate? I mean, is it really effective? Do we even want referrals? What's the production of the referrals? So really digging into this. And right now, I think one of the hottest things we're hearing about, and of course it should be, is internals. Really looking at, if this is the internal strength that I have now for this kind of position, how can this is the internal bench that I have now. This is what I need over here. Like maybe Intuit did this, maybe Intuit didn't do this, right? But what do I have internally? How can I train to? What's the demographic of who I can train to? How do I train to them? And then how does that fit? So this is a lot more than just a few bullet points. I know it looks kind of simple. I just want to, these are thought pieces. Again, this is what AI won't do, right? This is what we do.
And
Lizzie,
sourcing is
anything?
always relevant. Some of you may be looking at this thinking, oh, we get so much incoming and referrals. We don't necessarily need to do sourcing on top of it. I do want to drive home the fact that when you're sourcing, it's targeted. You're targeting people that on paper or from a profile view meet your needs, where your applicants, who are very different than your candidate pools, are going to apply because the position is enticing to them, not necessarily because they're enticing to you and your organization for the role. So even though you may get a tremendous amount of incoming, it is still important to look at your full pipeline. If you aren't sourcing, you're not looking at your full pipeline. So just wanted to kind of reiterate that, where a lot of you may be getting that really big income, those big incoming numbers that are hard enough to go through and get everyone dispositioned in the timeframes that you'd like to. But don't forget that if you're not sourcing, you're not looking at your full pipeline.
Right. And I also think if you have a very tailored candidate marketing plan, your job postings are transparent and clearly show the EVP and the type of position, your applicant numbers might actually go down if they're too much, but that could be a good thing, right? You want a candidate to look at the position and think, is this the right job for me? Not just apply to any rec. I know we have AI and tools that people use to do that, so that's not helping the problem. But sometimes having a very tailored job posting or advertising plan can make your incoming manageable if it's not. Okay. So let's move on to engaging the candidate. So this is where you're able to get the candidate to show interest in the position, to give up 30 minutes to 60 minutes of their time to talk to a recruiter about the opportunity. And this is where it's really important when you're talking about recruiter skill sets to make sure that the recruiters you have on board, and this is going to vary from different types of positions because you'll need a different recruiter to do high volume, maybe than someone that's going to do a more specific niche pharma sales type of recruitment. But being able to speak to the candidate and share the EVP and the requirements of the position, but make sure that the candidate's commonalities match up to the commonalities of the position and what it's like to work at that organization. So being able to assess that through a phone screen, any type of assessments that would be required for the role as well, that's important. And matching those up and saying, would this person be a fit? Are they likely to stay in the position? So this again is going to having the hiring manager involved and making recommendations on that, and who should be referred and why. Having hiring managers attend a networking event with you, right? So having the candidate meet the person firsthand, that can really give them insight into what the role's like. I think that would be great. Being able to partner with local community organizations. So, that could be your Chamber of Commerce, alumni associations that are close by. Some of these meetup groups for young professionals also work as well. Some of them get very specific into their business interests, things like that. But having someone meet with them firsthand that's an SME and can tell them exactly what a day is like in the position can really help build the engagement quickly. Team, any comments on engaging candidates? I think this one's super important because with the recruiter or the representative from the organization, they're giving a first impression of the company to the candidate. So making sure that they are well-versed into the position, the organization, the EVP, that they're that relationship person, can answer questions, because all through the steps of this process, we're always keeping the candidate experience in mind, right? So even if after we go through interviews or the candidate decides they're not the right fit for the position, we want them to have a good feeling about the organization and the recruitment process that they just completed. So that way they're more likely to refer someone, or maybe down the road, if their experience has changed and we have another position open for them, they would consider the opportunity again. But I think it's important to make sure that you have the right skill set in the seat to engage the candidate.
Yeah, and it's a sales headset as compared to traditional recruiter headset.
Right.
So one of the things that I know Lindsay looks at, and I know just too, across the board, when we're live, is the engagement rate. So what recruiter is engaging? Look, if you have recruiters that aren't engaging, it's okay. There's different skill sets. I don't know are we going to look at the talent, we're going to send the link for the talent assessments.
Mhm.
But the thing is to really get real about this, right? Sending out a job to somebody and saying, hey, I saw you're on LinkedIn. We have a position coming up. Here's, would you be interested? Is not engaging enough, right? Engaging is tell me about you. Let me understand who you are. Taking really good notes about that, recording it, getting it into your CRM or getting it into HireGate or getting it into wherever you're keeping it, and then saying, this is why I think Jessica would be a good candidate, and coming back and saying, Jess, we do that. Jess, we are looking for this. We promote people with your kind of background. And if not, if there's a different position they might be qualified for, or you just don't think it's a fit, you get legit, right? So you legitimately have an honest conversation with them about where it's going. That is a very different skill set than tell me about yourself. And, you're really just listening to check off boxes as compared to really getting in there to understand who they are and the value they bring. I think that what we're seeing now, more sophisticated roles, and I think that it's safe to say moving into the AI world, is that the work economy is changing and that we all have to get really good at examining what the candidate does beside what's on paper and how their unique skill sets that may not even be documented with us could be a good fit and even introduce a different concept to the business itself. I mean, that's how important engagement is.
Great. Okay, so moving on, now we're at the step to where we're gathering all of our applicants and all the information that we have to review and really determine who should be considered at this stage. So like Lindsay mentioned, making sure you have a good balance of incoming, of referrals, of internals, and that sourcing is important. And then doing a deep dive of a first review. Typically, this is looking at the resume to make sure they fit those qualifications. So again, doing a good assessment and job of making sure the candidate obviously has the necessary skills and experience they need to do the role, but also looking to promote diversity. So we're always looking to, like Christine just touched on this, considering candidates from different backgrounds and experiences, and being able to, as a recruiter, assess where they could fit within the organization. And then being able to sit down with the hiring manager and explain the specific skills that stand out to this candidate and then how they could fit for the role. They may need to be trained up, but they could still be a good investment for the company. So I think gathering and review, this is an important piece where the recruiter and the hiring manager and obviously TA need to be on the same page and in agreement. So determining who needs to move on to the interview process with the hiring manager. But as long as you've done a really good job of defining the position in the beginning and then having these ongoing communications with the hiring manager, when you get to this stage, you should be good to go and be able to make those decisions. Lindsay, have you, experienced anything in this step of the recruiting process where it's either it's been a challenge or something we need to work with? Any insight you can give into here?
That's a great question, Jess. And so a lot of times let's say we're looking at a slate of 5 or 6 candidates. We're trying to determine if they should move to that next phase, to that hiring manager interview, or maybe past that interview. Kind of gathering all of those stakeholders. So your hiring manager, maybe, you know, the most successful person you have in your department in that role, your recruiter, and really talking through all of the candidates that are in play to determine who should move on is so important. And too many hands in the pot, it gets muddy. So, you know, you want to really be selective as to who you choose to do that. However, if more than 50% of your people in the pipeline aren't moving forward, you need to go backwards. You need to take that group and go back to defined, go back to attract, and find out where those pieces are missing, right? So I hate to say go backwards because that feels negative, but essentially you still have these tools to build off of. So if you get to this point where you're really analyzing who you have in the pipeline, maybe things have changed. Maybe it took you 6 weeks to get there. And in those 6 weeks, the requirements of the role have changed or the need of the business has changed. It doesn't mean it's a fail. All it means is that we have to adjust and realign to stay on track. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Do not get discouraged if you get to this point and 50% of your pipeline isn't the right fit. It just means other pieces have changed. As long as you can identify those pieces, you can get right back in line and keep moving forward faster.
Right.
I'm sorry, Christine, we didn't hear you. Can you say that again?
I said, it's, you know, you're saying something like go back and check. Yeah, you're going back and check, but you're really going forward by going back. Right. So it's not like you failed. It's not a fall down. As things keep changing, going back and saying, let me go back to the methodology. Where am I on and where am I off? That's your solution. That's actually moving ahead.
Mhm.
Cool.
So now we're at the interview part of the recruiting cycle right here. So this is where we're going to really assess the candidates and determine who fits the need and who we would like to make the offer to. So being able to have solid assessment criteria, and remember in the beginning when we were doing all the discovery and defining the position, we were gathering information to help us create tailored recruitment guides. At People Science, we call them key element interview guides. And these are guides that our recruiters and our hiring managers use on the specific positions to make sure that one, yes, they do meet the requirements for the role, but do they also fit the commonalities of the position? Would they be a good fit within the work environment at this specific organization? So being able to use those guides to determine if they meet the attributes needed, and then also looking at former successful hires. I think Lindsay mentioned this earlier. You know, what was their criteria when we brought them in? Are we still looking at the same for future hires? And then this is super important as far as the candidate experience and the hiring manager experience goes, is setting the interview strategy. So being able to know who's going to be involved and why, what tools are we using for interviews? So will these be Zoom meetings, team meetings, on-site? Are we using assessment tools to evaluate the candidates? And communication. So as we're moving through the communications piece of the interview process, who is responsible for that? Typically, you may have a recruitment coordinator that's managing it, but it's really important to keep those communications timely so everyone's on the same page and the candidate doesn't have a bad experience, your hiring manager doesn't get frustrated, and most importantly, that you're not losing time as you're looking to get to a hire. And being able to review the grades as a whole. So making sure that the assessment process is consistent for everyone that's in the interview stage. So like I mentioned, looking at those interview assessment guides, making sure that they include the key criteria and commonalities. And then as you are, you know, maybe using an assessment tool that you've never used before, or comparing it to ones in the past, really keeping a close eye on that to make sure that they're working, make sure that the results are giving you what you need, and then providing recommendations on other candidate assessments that may work better. We have an internal team here at People Science that does that on a monthly basis. So they'll usually get together and look at HR tech, what's the newest software, do a demo on it, and maybe test something out. And that could be an assessment we use in the future. And ultimately, everyone wants to get to this point in the process where you've completed interviews, you have a good pipeline, and you're ready for hiring managers to move forward on those. Another big piece, which we do a lot of consulting work and also in our partnerships, is making sure interview compliance is there and that hiring managers are trained. They're prepared, because this isn't what they do on a daily basis. It's easy to sometimes get frustrated or throw your hands up. I don't know why they asked that question, or they didn't do the interview the way it should have been done. But making sure your organization has training in place for hiring managers, they understand the why of it is important, and that you're also getting their feedback as well. So after interviews are completed, hearing what worked, what didn't work well, and then taking that into consideration and re-engineering the process, I think you'll find the time to interview will decrease and your satisfaction level of your interview stakeholders will increase.
I also think the assessment, this piece where we're assessing, is where you want to make sure you're hitting your deliverables in regards to diversity, right? So we've touched on diversity in a lot of these different categories, but now you're looking at your interview slate. Your interviews are completed, your candidates have been assessed, you have your qualified candidates to move forward. So if you have a DEI initiative in place, this is where you want to say, okay, am I hitting the benchmark? Do I have a 30% diverse panel to move forward with? Whatever that looks like on your end, whatever you've established diversity wise, you want to make sure is in the pipeline. This is where you want to make sure you're meeting that expectation before you're moving those candidates forward. So you can check off that box and say, okay, we've done our due diligence. We've made sure there's diversity in the pipeline. That being said, you also want to analyze how you're going to submit your panel of folks. We've had clients say we want blind resumes with no names on them because we don't want, to make judgment there. So not only do you want to make sure you're hitting your diversity levels, but you want to make sure you're being conscious of how you move those candidates forward in the process as well, which falls into this assess interview portion.
Great. And I'm watching the clock. I know we only have a few minutes left, so try to get through these next stages because they're very important. So now we've completed interviews, assessed candidates. We're ready to move on to the offer process. This is where the objective is to obviously fill the position and let everyone know involved in the process. So making sure that you have a good strategy in place for this, like Lindsay just mentioned, making sure you have all the interview feedback and forms completed from the panel members, and gathering the stakeholders together to discuss the candidates and get feedback. It's important. This is good for the recruiter to understand if they're on or off target. And then for future hires, it's helpful so you know how to better prepare for strategy. Really important here is making sure whoever has the offer or making the offer to the candidate is skilled at that. And sometimes you may need to do offer and test probe acceptance questions, right? So they may have a candidate on the phone that at first is declining, but being able to have a recruiter or sometimes even a hiring manager that can take those rebuttals from the candidates and talk them through it and highlight the value of the position and joining the organization to them is important. And then, yes, your candidate finally accepts, you fill the position. Onboarding is super important because I know sometimes you can lose the candidate. They could be getting another offer at the same time, find something that they think is better for them. So it's really important to handhold them through this process. So make sure that you're introducing the new hire to the organization, the expectations are set there. And then once you have the new hire started in their position, checking in with them regularly as a recruiter, I think, is a really good way to build relationships and also helps you with referrals, right? So if that candidate had a great experience with the recruiter, they're still friendly after the start date. If they think of someone that could be a fit for the next role at the company, they're more likely to reach out that recruiter and start the conversation. So always having those check-ins on 30, 60, 90 days is important. And then keeping a close connection with them to make sure that they're happy in the role. This also gives the recruiter a lot of good information when they're looking for the next hire. They understand that they know what the candidates are going to value, and they'll be able to communicate that better. So we didn't touch on these outer points of the continuum. We call these the connectors. And we kind of put this chart here because it's important as you're going through each bucket of the continuum that we just looked at to see, where could technology fit in? So what type of HR tech would help me get better at defining help me get better at sourcing or assessing candidates. So look at your tech stack and think about what you have and what helps you in each of these buckets. Looking at how you collect the data. This is really important because you want to have metrics in place. How will you know how well you're doing if you don't have the data? So using a software like HireGate or whatever's in your applicant tracking system or CRM to measure your success in these areas. Compliance. So looking at each step of the recruiting continuum and thinking about compliance. Job postings, are they compliant? Your assessment process, is that compliant? Communication. So making sure that at each step of the process, you're communicating with the candidates, the hiring managers, any of the other stakeholders in the process, and evaluating. So what you're doing today, if you went on to our website and did the TA assessment, is being able to grade and look at what you're doing. And then most importantly, I know we're all focused on this right now, is what's the return on investment? So is the activity and the budget that you're spending on sourcing, is it turning an investment on that? Your team as a whole, how is talent acquisition showing your ROI? So I told you that would be a lot today. There's still so much that we didn't get into, but we really highly encourage anyone that's interested into digging into more of these buckets, or if you had a specific question, to reach out to us. You can go to our website. You can schedule a strategy session online through our booking. You can give us a call. We're happy to get those set up, and definitely suggest you go to our website, look at some of the webinars that we have about EVP, sourcing, candidate diversity, and do those assessments. It's a good exercise to do them every few months and see where you're at. Christine, Lindsay, any last thoughts?
Harry?
I don't think so. I think we covered it.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you to everyone that attended. You can follow People Science on social media, HireGate as well. We will send out an email after this webinar that has a link to watch this, and then you can also download the deck. But like I said, reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you and help you out. Thanks, everybody, for attending.
Thank you.
Bye.